Soloing tonight here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Blocking low, finally beginning to move. And we'll take a look at what that means. It'll certainly get the traffic jam going here. And we'll be taking a look at the weekend and the long range, plus the weather that's going around the country right now. It's unusually quiet in most places. So just sit back and enjoy. Have your popcorn ready here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, -1 Joe. Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. If you're a landscaper professionally, or if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you need mulch or topsoil or sand or any other hardware supplies, you can get them at Omni. 631-756-1125 for the best prices anywhere on Long Island. The website is omnitruevalue.com. And also brought to you by Tempest, by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing network on the planet. They also have all sorts of other weather merchandise for you weather enthusiasts out there. And if you use the link that's pinned to the top of the chat board or on the description of this video and the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, you get 10% off, which isn't too shabby. So, on that note, here I am. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Let me get this out of the way here. Welcome everybody on the chat board to tonight's show. And for those of you watching in the background, or if you're new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, hit the like button if you like it. And hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss it. It's we're here Monday through Thursdays at 7:35 and Sundays at 11 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays we usually take off, but if there's a big storm around, we will be there. So everybody's the frustration, I think, here we are. It's the 3rd of May, and we are dealing with the kind of pattern that snow lovers would have just absolutely gone bonkers for. Just think about the fact that if this were January or February or March or December, certainly the bulk of that precipitation that's been rotating around that upper low would have been in the form of snow, and it's not. But yet in some places, Johnny Quest, for example, told me today on a message, he mentioned a few places, and there have been some pictures floating around on social media from West Virginia, specifically. He said that Davis, West Virginia was the biggest winner, 16.2 inches of snow. I know that Snowshoe in West Virginia, the ski resort, did exceptionally well out of this. Elevated areas there and in Southwest PA, I mean, you probably had to go up 3,000 feet or higher to get it, but nonetheless, it did occur. And of course, elsewhere, we've been dealing with some low-top convection that has produced some small hail, very, very cold in the upper layers of the atmosphere. And when you put a May sun on top of very, very cold air, you get these low-top convective bursts that occur. In fact, there were even some special marine warnings, and I don't think I saw any severe thunderstorm warnings. I saw some special marine warnings down around Chesapeake Bay a little while ago. But that's what happens. You got to remember the sun now is we're about 7.5 weeks or so from the peak sun angle. So go forward 7 weeks, and you're talking about a sun that it's like mid-August. So you can develop convection in mid-August with the sun in mid-August. You can do it now if the air aloft is cold enough, and it certainly was. The blocking pattern, the traffic jam, is, however, beginning to break down. Now, it's a process. It's going to take about 2 days for it to work out. We're still going to be dealing with some instability over the next couple of days, although I tend to think that it will be a little less tomorrow and even more so on Friday. And it should lead us to a nice weekend. And just getting the sun out will be enough to at least boost the temperatures eventually up back toward where they should be at this time of year, which is well up into the 60s. And probably on Sunday, I think we'll see temperatures reaching into the 70s, at least away from the ocean. The one thing I would just point out, though, that if there's usually things like this are not just a one-off. They would tend to repeat, so do not be totally surprised. Maybe it won't be of the same magnitude, but don't be totally surprised if we wind up getting into another gloom and doom type pattern at some point down the road in the next couple of weeks. It's very typical for this time of year. You know, the April is often ascribed to in the old saying about April showers bringing May flowers, but if you look at weather history, at least that may be true for parts of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, but not all. Oftentimes, it's really more like late April or during the month of May, particularly the first half of the month of May, where you still are dealing with the leftovers of whatever cold Arctic air is up there in northern Canada, and the atmosphere just basically trying to disperse the last of that cold air before we make the full transition over to eventually summertime weather. So it's all part of the process. Nothing new here, nothing mysterious, nothing geo-engineered. It's just typical late April, early May weather that we are seeing. And on that note, we can begin tonight by taking a look at the watches and warnings map, which, by the way, is pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot happening. The things I would highlight is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, for example, they've got flood watches up. Now, that area got some snow up from that upper low, so it immediately melts, and if you get a little rain, then you're going to wind up with some flooding issues. You've got flood watches up for northwestern Colorado and up the Rockies. A lot of the light green areas are all flood advisories for rising rivers because of the snow melt. Remember that the West had a gangbusters year. The other story, I think, in the southeastern Florida, if we take a look here, we had red flag warnings up. Now, they've started to take them down as we go into sunset. It's been a really windy day here in North Georgia. We had certainly gusts up to the 30, 40 mile an hour range at times. And the air is also very dry. We've got dew points that are way down there in the 20s. Did manage to get into the 60s today, but the wind was there was a definite chill in the air that we were experiencing. We also have some frost advisories up for the Western Carolina mountains. Now, the only thing with the frost there and here where I am in Northeast Georgia is whether the wind drops off tonight or not. And I tend to think that the wind will probably stay up. It'll drop, but I don't know if it'll drop to dead calm. Otherwise, it's very quiet up and down the eastern seaboard right now. A few leftover the wind advisories that were up for parts of South Carolina, they're done. We've got some frost advisories in the lower lakes in northern Indiana, northwest Ohio, and some wind advisories up in parts of northwestern Nevada and a few counties in central Arizona. So that pretty much covers it from that respect. Now, I've got the Northeast satellite view. We've got the whole view of the Atlantic. So if you were lucky enough to be in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, and points west, skywise, you had an absolutely gorgeous day. Hardly a cloud in the sky, if at all. But meanwhile, you can see the rotation here of the upper low. You can also see that it has moved from where it was in the Great Lakes. It is now moving fairly quickly to the southeast, and it's going to make its exit off the New Jersey coast soon and head out to the east. But we're still getting these spokes. You can pick them out. The brighter white cloud tops, well, as the loop goes by, I just kind of drew it from the last frame. But you see these spokes that go around the upper low, and as each one goes by, you get clouds and some showers. When you're in between those spokes, you actually wind up breaking out into some sunshine. And here is the wide satellite view of the U.S. And again, making some progress. There's some clouds with some moisture running through the western Great Lakes. Now, there's an upper trough there. So that's actually helping to kick this system out to the east. So we need this to get out of the way so we can get into the stable air that covers the southeast Florida, the Mississippi Valley, and on up into the northern plains. We do have some tropical moisture coming out of the Pacific, and that's streaming into West Texas. And we also have some moisture off the coast of California with a cutoff low there. That's going to be bringing in some rain in parts of the uh, in the west, and that weather system is not going to be of concern here. The fortunate thing is, at least from the standpoint of the upper low going out in the ocean, and the fact that it's moving slowly, is once it does get out there, it should make for nice weather conditions through much of the east. There's a small exception over the weekend for a brief time in the mid-Atlantic, and I'll show you that when we get to the models. But for the most part, it'll put us in a bit of a sweet spot for a few days, and then we'll start to deal with other things as we move into next week. Here's the radar this evening. You can see the spokes of showers. You also can see that special marine warning that was up for parts of Chesapeake Bay. I'll give it a quick refresh, and it's now shrinking away. Again, this is some of that low top convection that's developed. A little bit more in the way of some showers up in upstate New York along I-90 and in the Adirondacks, and those are moving from east to west. And the showers and the precip that's in western New York and western Pennsylvania down into West Virginia, basically moving from north to south, and then the southern end of it across the state of Virginia with these little bands of showers, those are moving from northwest to southeast. Meanwhile, mostly aloft as far as the precip that's up in the upper Great Lakes. We don't worry about that too much, other than the fact that that is the kicker for this system. And then you look out in the west, where you see there's quite a bit of rain that has moved in from San Francisco down to LA and a little bit further south, well, almost, but not quite down to LA. But there is an arm that is coming in and may probably bring some rain there during the overnight hours, and some scattered showers here up into parts of Oregon and also back into northern Montana. Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk of severe weather and a marginal risk of severe weather in eastern New Mexico and West Texas up to the Oklahoma Panhandle and into a small portion of southeast Colorado and southwest Kansas. They also had convective risk of general thunderstorms. You can see where that was set up. New Hampshire, Vermont, New York State, Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey. But now that we're getting close to sundown, and I'm thinking that during the overnight period, there's probably not going to be any worry about that. You're going to lose the daytime heating. Going forward, as we take a look at the risk areas here for tomorrow, we have a rather large area of marginal and slight risk through central Texas into the body of the state of Oklahoma. And the marginal risk then kind of goes up into northwestern Kansas, another small area of marginal risk in northern Nebraska. No convective risk in the east. I think we're going to be done with that with the upper low now by tomorrow being offshore. But the general thunderstorms kind of move their way up through the Rockies and into the Pacific Northwest, and also in parts of coastal Southern California, showing some risk for a few thunderstorms. And on day 3, we have 2 areas of marginal risk, one in central Texas, the other in northern Mississippi and eastern Arkansas. But again, much of the East Coast, up and down the eastern seaboard from Maine to Florida, east of the Appalachians, no issues there. And last time I checked on the day 4 to 8 time frame, there was no specific areas in the long range, but they do have predictability too low for each day. So that sort of hints that there might be something as far as thunderstorm activity severe somewhere. On the rainfall forecast map, now, again, what you see in the Northeast is pretty much covered by what's going on now. So we're talking about mostly 1/10 of an inch or less, except for a couple of patchy areas of 1/4 of an inch in the Catskills, Poconos, down into parts of eastern Pennsylvania, also into southwestern Pennsylvania. Picks up a little bit more as you get into Virginia and North Carolina, 1/4 to 1/2, because there is a little disturbance that's going to be coming along, moving southeastward over the weekend. And then we have more substantial rains up and down the Mississippi Valley into the northern plains, 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, small pocket of 2 inches plus in central Texas there, thunderstorm driven. And also in the western part of the United States, particularly the northern Rockies, and up and down the West Coast, anywhere from some areas getting very little, other areas showing 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch, like right along the coast of California, from the central part of the coast down to about LA and not quite to San Diego, and also up in Oregon and Washington near the Pacific coast. So that takes care of that for the next 7 days. David Fuller, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Did I happen to see Joe in the video? Okay, I looked at the video you sent me last night, but I forgot. I got to go back and look at it again, David. But no, I didn't see Joe in the video. Was I supposed to see Joe in the video? I will take a look when we're done. Okay, so I thought we'd start with the upper air map because I want to at least give you a good feel. This is a pretty good example of what happens when the atmosphere is blocked. It's actually the most important feature here is not the upper low over us, but the upper low that is out here in the Atlantic, halfway between Newfoundland and the Azores. It's right along about 50-ish north, or maybe a little bit further north than that, maybe about 55-ish north, and along 40 west. And I'm sorry, no, it is at 50 west. I'm sorry, I got my lines kind of messed up here. Hold on, that's 80, 60. No, I was right the first time. It's closer to 40. So that upper low has been out here, and I've backed this up. I'm going to back this up. Just did I have it all the way back to 72 hours? I do. So this is back from Sunday afternoon. It's been sitting here. So because that's sitting here, you have a ridge that is off the East Coast, running up into easternmost Canada. And then you have this deep trough and the strong ridge that's in the west, along the Rockies and into the Pacific Northwest, and another trough that's right off the west coast. So this thing is it's just been locked away. It can't move until this Azores low gets out of the way. It can't move. Well, guess what? It finally is getting out of the way, and as a result, now here we are, Monday into Tuesday. The upper low is just basically spinning, and you have arms of moisture, little short waves that are rotating around it. Finally, it's getting the kick, and the kick is coming from a little short wave that is upstream. This was early this morning, approaching Lake Winnipeg. California cutoff here now, that system that was up further north on the coast has dropped southward. So that's sort of locked in over there. But the Azores system is now pivoting east-west and weakening. So that is between this and this, okay, the system northwest of the Azores and the shortwave that's near Lake Winnipeg, we can finally open up the traffic jam here and get this upper low to move, which is what it's doing tonight. It's dropping southeastward through Pennsylvania, off the New Jersey coast tonight into tomorrow morning, and then it starts to move pretty quickly to the east in a much more weakened state. There's another trough that's dropping southward around it, and part of that actually gets sheared back westward, and part of it moves southeast. So that's what we have to work through the next 2 days. So the atmosphere tomorrow is going to be unstable, but I don't think it's going to be as unstable as what we saw today in the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic. It'll also become even less unstable on Friday, or the atmosphere will become more stable as the upper low pulls further to the east. And then I think we're going to be in a decent position over the weekend. With most of the troughing offshore, we're kind of on the edge of this northerly flow. And I think that's going to probably mean that temperatures, they're going to warm up because you're going to get the sun out. And that'll at least reflexively bring temperatures back up in the afternoons toward where they should be for this time of year. But we're not going to really be able to get too much beyond that because of the fact that we still have a bit of a northerly flow coming out of Canada. Still a lot of energy here out in the west on Sunday. And then as we move into next week, the flow across the United States becomes more westerly. Okay, you'll notice that. It's just kind of more west to east. The upper low from offshore, now east of Newfoundland, south of Greenland. So we're going to get into a bit of a more normalized flow. The question for the longer haul is whether we get into another blocky situation as we move through the next week and beyond. It does look like most of next week might wind up being okay. In fact, we get into a ridge position by the time we get to Mother's Day weekend. So if that verifies, it may mean for a nice warmish weekend for the middle of May. Eventually, some troughing does drop back into the east beyond that. But I'm not seeing any kind of big blocky pattern through the middle part of the month, at least not on this run. There were some hints of it earlier today. In fact, if we go back to the prior run, I might want to, you'll just want to take a look at this. On the prior run, it's a little more blocky in the longer, not like what we had, but you still have higher than normal pressures up across Canada and in northwest Canada in particular. So there is more troughing that wants to drop into the eastern part of the United States after next week. As I said earlier in the show, that given that we had what we had now, weather patterns do tend to repeat, so it would not be a shock to me if we wind up getting into another blocky scenario at some point as we move through this month. So, what does that spell on the surface? So let's take a look. Here's a close-up view, by the way. We can look at it from this vantage point. And you can see the upper low here just sort of rotating around until today. And now it's starting that move to the southeast and off the New Jersey coast and out. And then, of course, we get into a little bit more of a ridge position as we move through the weekend, though we still have troughing just to the east. So it kind of keeps that. So it's a northwest flow with a little bit of a colder flow that's coming into New England and upstate New York. And again, that's what I think we wind up holding on to. Temperatures are going to have, get back to normal, but not much above. And then you see the ridge that's to the west there starts to shift a little bit further to the east, but we don't have any kind of big ridge building up the east coast. And here comes that trough. Again, this was on the earlier run around the 16th, 17th, which would argue that maybe we would get into another blocky scenario, although the 18Z run doesn't quite show that. But I would favor the idea that we could see this pattern reemerge once again. So here's our low. You notice it's not a whole lot of widespread precip going on around the country. It's kind of spotty here and there. The low moves out. Some instability tomorrow, but not nearly as much as what we had today. Even less so on Friday, because now we have higher pressures in eastern Canada trying to build down the eastern seaboard. You see some showers and storms there in the lower and middle Mississippi Valley on Friday, trying to move east, but they're going to hit that high. So it winds up perhaps not, you only can get so far east and north before that high kind of keeps it away. That's one good thing about that trough just off the east coast, is that it's going to keep this next weather system away from the northeast and mid-Atlantic states over the weekend, so it should be pretty good. There's some moisture, though, that does move into Kentucky, Tennessee. Might be some showers around for the Derby earlier in the day, but then it looks like they kind of thin out as the day wears on, and then they drop into Virginia and North Carolina. Models were earlier trying to bring showers up into northern Virginia and Maryland and Delaware, but this high that's coming down might be enough to keep it away. Rain going back up into the northern plains, and while it be on the showery side in the southeast and south, and then also up the Mississippi Valley and the lakes, I think Sunday should be fine. Monday looks like we're still trying to hang on, and then maybe we'll get close to some rain on Tuesday. But again, today's run from earlier wants to keep higher pressures up in Canada, sort of holding back any rain from getting in here through a good chunk of next week until maybe the very end of the week. So we will we'll see how that plays out. But other than that, there's not a whole lot happening, folks. It's a quiet Wednesday. I'm here. There I am. It's been a pretty quiet Wednesday. I drove back from Mississippi yesterday, and I got home about a little bit before midnight. So today was sort of a unwinding kind of day for me. It took me a little while to get going. I slept late this morning, which for me is, I'm usually up at around 5 or 5:30 in the morning, but I actually slept till about 8 o'clock So that kind of put me behind the eight ball from the onset. So I think this is going to be one of those early to bed type of nights for me. Just going to see, just running through the chat board to see. Let's see. By the way, for those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, um, I have this thing about Perry Mason. I really love the show, and over the summer when I binge watched it, over last summer and fall when I binge watched it, I took pictures because they have had this wonderful. Um, when they have the courtroom scenes, they always had women wearing some of the whatever the most fashionable hats were at the time, and some of them were actually kind of ridiculous. So I took pictures of them, and I put them up on Facebook for a while. But what I did today was I put the Perry Mason music and made a 1 minute reel, and I threw it up on Facebook Reels. So if you haven't seen it, you can give it a look. It just gives you a good laugh. If you like the television series, you certainly will understand where I'm going with all of this. So I'm just kind of scanning here to see if anybody has any questions or comments. I see Mrs. Rayo is on the chat board tonight. Joe's doing a talk tonight that was going to run late, so that's why Joe is not here. And the rainfall from the weekend was so substantial that I think if we go dry for about 4 or 5 days, I don't think anybody will complain. I will just strongly suggest that you do take advantage of the weather this time of year when it's nice, because you can easily go back into one of these long stretches where the weather is not cooperative. And that can make you kind of depressed, especially if you want to do stuff outside, you want to get your garden going. Take advantage of the nice days that lie ahead to do that so that you're not putting it off and then suddenly we go back into another gloom and doom type pattern. So anyhow, all right, I think we're just going to wrap it up because again, there's not a whole lot. There's no severe weather to look at, so we're all good. So anyway, our Joe and Joe Weather Show, as always, is brought to you by, if I can just get it up on the screen here. Nope. Hold on. There we go. It's brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware, and they ask the question, you got mulch? Well, they do, and they got topsoil and sand too. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. OmniTrueValue.com is the website, and also Tempest by WeatherFlow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. You get it and be part of the fastest growing observing network on the planet. They also have a lot of other weather merchandise. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you decide to make a purchase, don't forget to use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show so that you can get 10% off. Miss Fowlerite says, can I talk about the weather setup along the west coast of Baja? It seems like there's a system in the Pacific, but it doesn't make it over Baja. Okay, so we can do that, even though I said goodbye. All right, but that's okay. We don't follow conventional show rules here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So, just give me a second here. See, when Joe's here, he can talk while I maneuver. All right. I'm doing literally the job of what used to take like 5 people to do is what I'm doing now. So we'll look at the western U.S. First off, why don't we take a look at what's going on with the upper air? And there's your deep cutoff that's off San Francisco and dropping southward. And then it kind of pivots eastward and northeastward into Nevada. And you get mostly of a southwest flow over the Baja Peninsula. So I'm thinking the rain probably that's in California only gets so far south and then cuts off. And if we take a look here on the surface map, that's kind of what happens. You see the upper low. Yeah, sometimes what I love about West Coast systems is sometimes you look at them on a map, especially when you look at the upper air map, and they look like these really enormous systems. And then when you look at the surface, there's not a whole lot to them. And here we have a weak surface low with an area of rain that comes in, but it's nothing really impressive. Now, granted, it is May. I mean, this probably would have a different outcome if we were back in January, February, and into March, but it is May. But yeah, none of that rain makes it any further. A little bit of shower activity that gets down to about San Diego, and that's it. The Baja Peninsula looks fine and dandy. So, weather down there should be okay overall. Yes, it is extra innings for me, Dennis Cassia. Absolutely. Okay. So, on that note, now I guess I can say goodnight. David Fuller. Oh no, that's the Tempest thing. I'm behind here. There I am. David Fuller, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. Thanks everybody for being here and putting up with the solo performance. And Joe will be back tomorrow night. We'll be back both tomorrow night at the usual time, 7:35 p.m. Nighty night, everybody.